Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Line Your Own Pockets. Cool conversation we had recently with the CEO of a brokerage, and it kind of led us to start thinking we should start talking about what you should be looking for when you come to pick a broker. It's going to be interesting for me with this conversation because, like we joked about in Canada, we don't have a lot of options, but we got a couple. So I'll chime in when we can. And, we've been talking about how both of us are interactive brokers clients for ages now. So I guess we could start with why that, and if you are looking for a broker, what drew us to that one, and maybe what could draw you away from to other brokers if you were looking to move.
Yeah, so when we talked about this topic, we both sort of thought, yeah, surely we've done an episode on this, but we
Yeah.
haven't, which is kind of odd. But it is sort of a topic more for beginners, which is great. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's not a space that either of us sort of live in. So, I think it is worth talking through this. The way I thought about this is I was thinking through my entire progression about what brokers I've had money with over the years
Hmm.
and my progression. So I thought it would be useful to go back to the very beginning when I graduated college and go through each brokerage that I've used and why I switched between them or what happened.
Yeah, I
And
like that.
probably be a trip down memory lane to a lot of these. And I'm interested to hear if you've heard of some of these because it's been a lot. It's been 20 years since some of these names have been even mentioned, I think.
Well, and what I think is funny is that a lot of, especially if you're a new trader, let's say in the last 5 years, listening to this, a lot of people are like, well, it's broker. They all don't charge you anything commissions, and they all have API access. And they all have, and it was like not back then. There's
Yeah.
actually been a lot of change and a lot of update and growth from these different brokers going back, really, like COVID was a big change, but all through on the way there was, like $50 trades down to $20, down to 10, down to 5, and then some came online and some. So yeah, there's it seems like something that may not have as much of a history if you weren't there living it and you were just kind of in the world of brokers as it stands right now.
Yeah. And I remember when I opened a brokerage account for the first time, people were sort of saying the same thing. Like, I think the first one I opened was with T. Rowe Price, which you can't
Okay.
even, I mean, it's not like you can be day trading with T. Rowe Price. But that was the first one I opened. But even at the time, there was this massive battle for to see how low commissions could go, and
Hmm.
it started for such a high level. I think the first one, uh, the first rate I remember paying is $9.99 a trade, which was so cheap. I mean, it had undercut like everybody else in the market. So this was like so inexpensive, nobody could really believe it. But yet, look at where we are now. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, and this is where the me joking on about Canada is going to come the whole way because there are still brokers out there that connect to your bank and they're still charging 9.99 a trade.
Yeah.
And so that I guess would be one of the first things to look for. It's not going to be nearly as much of a problem. I doubt there's a broker still standing in the US that's charging that amount, but that would be one of the first things to look at is what are they charging you for commissions. And different places in the world are going to be different, but at the end of the day, if everything else is equal that we're going to talk about, if price could be a determining factor, especially if you're active, if you're talking, $10 a trade and you're going to make 1,000 trades throughout the year, which could be light if you're going to make even more than that, right? You just
Yeah.
think about it, how much you're paying your broker for accessing a market that they're all going to get you to, right? It's all around the same area. So yeah, I think it's crazy that there's still brokers out there that do charge it. And if you're at one, run as fast as you can.
Well, we might come to that. That might not be like one thing I always go back to, a lot of commissions are free now, but you get what you pay for. You're going to
Hmm.
get it's a reason that they're free. It's not free to them, so they're getting something out of your free commissions. Um, so free may sound right, but you're going to get what you pay for in executions and fills. So maybe that doesn't make a difference to the strategy you're trading, but there will be strategies that do make a difference. And you can't imagine. I can't imagine using a free uh, commission structure with some of the strategies I trade. This it just wouldn't work.
How have you tested it? That's always my wonder because we really don't have. There's one broker that I'm interested in, and we'll probably talk about later, that is free in Canada, but we banned payment for order flow, which we can talk about. That's how it's free. So that we haven't had this, and so all I'm going by is what kind of other people have talked about. I just wonder if there's like you've ever done a bake off where it's like I'm gonna because you're doing everything robotically. It'd be
Mm-hmm.
very easy to move a little bit of money into another brokerage account and say, okay, I want you guys to trade off the same signal generated through the same robot and into two different brokers, one for free and one for paid, and just track it for a month or so and see what the difference in the fills are.
Yeah, I have done that many, many years ago uh, with IB versus there was a brokerage called MB Trading, which also had an API, which was like one of the very first brokerages that had an API besides IB. And I could tell that the fills were not as good. And I'm pretty sure they didn't have a free commission plan, but they had a um, per trade commission plan, not a per share commission plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was had these, and I was trading larger and larger. So it actually, if you do the math, it did make sense because I was actually paying a lot of commissions to IB. I still do. And if you do the math, if you put a cap on uh, the commission per trade, that could make a big difference. I mean, a
Yeah.
huge difference in the trading I was doing at the time. So I did that, and the platform wasn't as good. The fills weren't as good. So I just the platform, the reliability was a big, an important thing in the way I thought about it. And I realized, okay, these commissions that I'm paying with IB, yeah, it's a big number that I pay every year, but it's actually well worth it.
Well, yeah, because and I think that's why, people who are maybe doubting, it would make sense to run that experiment because at the end of the day, you want to look and you want to say, okay, yes, this is a line item in which I'm writing off to IB, but is it just a hidden line item somewhere else, right? Am I making the same, paying the same thing or worse, but I'm just not seeing it overtly. It's just happening kind of under the hood by, slippage being a little worse and maybe your platform's not as good because if they're not making money from commissions, then they're not going to have the money to invest into the platform. They're not going to be able to pay the devs. They're not going to, right? They're not going to be able to
Yeah.
do that. So are you seeing it right in front of your face or is it being hidden? So kind of your job to go in and dive in to see if it's actually hidden.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back to, I mentioned that my first brokerage account was with T. Rowe Price. I
Hmm.
bought a mutual fund, held it for a year. I think it was like, it was a tech fund, and this was 1997. So, like, of course, it did well. Um, so, but after that, I realized, okay, well, I think I could do a little bit more work than just buying a mutual fund and do better. So that was sort of my first uh, toe in the water for making a trade at all. And then, okay, I thought I can do a little bit more work. Let me look at swing trading to see if that would make sense. So I switched from T. Rowe Price to a company called Daytech, Daytech Online. Do you remember this name?
Oh, never heard of that one. I heard of T Row, and I think I even heard of the other one. But yeah, not that one.
Yeah, so Daytech Online was, I'm pretty sure it was the most popular discount brokerage at the time. I
Hmm.
mean, it was very popular in the US. They got bought by TD Ameritrade, or maybe even they merged with TD Ameritrade, which was another big one at the time. So they got absorbed by TDA. And in fact, it may have been just Ameritrade at the time. Like there's been so much change in this
Yeah.
industry. So I started using Daytech Online, and this was web-based interface for making trades. I think pretty sure they were $9.99 a trade. And I started making trades on that platform. Um, so I'm pretty sure the next brokerage I used was a company called CyberTrader. Do you remember
Yes.
that?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So I I really liked CyberTrader. This was the first downloadable platform I used.
Mm.
So, you go and install CyberTrader on your machine and you make trades in this program that runs on your machine versus a website. So I think that's probably another thing for traders to think about. Do you need a downloadable platform, or can you get by with a web interface for entering trades? And I think day traders, the more active you trade, the more you're going to want a downloadable platform. So I don't know what your take about that is, Michael.
Yeah, the only kind of caveat I'd give there would maybe be to like an alpaca or something like that, where if you're doing all of your trading, there's kind of like this weird middle ground where if you're not doing very much trading, a web platform will probably be fine. If you're day trading like super actively yourself, then you're definitely gonna need a downloadable platform. But then I think there's another world all the way on the other side where there's an argument for guys like us that aren't doing the trading ourselves, that it's kind of the API interface between whatever's sending the signals and whatever's receiving the
Yeah.
signals is more important. As long as we can very quickly access and like flatten positions and cut off things kind of remotely, that would be important. So it's like the more active and the more discretionary you are, the more that downloaded platform I think is important.
Yeah. And as I'm thinking through these old brokerages I was using, I realized a lot of them were very influential into how my trading strategies evolved and the way I started thinking about automation. And I remember specifically with CyberTrader. Did you ever use CyberTrader?
No, not in Canada.
Yeah.
That's going to be the
So there was a very unique thing that they offered, which to this day I think is the only thing that I believe in my mind competes with IB and the way they do it, which we'll get to in a minute. They had these things called order templates. So it was a form that you could basically set up a batch of orders and be sent at once. And I don't remember, it's a little bit fuzzy, but I remember thinking that, okay, this is a really cool way to do it. Like set up a batch where you could have your
Mhm.
entry order and your exit orders, at least some of your exit orders in this batch, which I thought, okay, this is really nice. And the way they did it, I think you could set up some templates that would live in your platform that were customized to you. So you could use one of your custom templates from that point forward when you made a trade. Really cool concept. And that really got me thinking, okay, there's probably an even better generic way to do this. But at the time, it was really, really cool. It really opened my eyes to what was possible.
I think that's a fun thing too about exploring different. I've played with a lot of prop softwares, right? Like DAS and geez, there's a couple Fusion. I think there's like a handful of those kind of things, and it's the same thing. Is that as you start to see other bits of technology out there, it does start to kind of wake up the brain to say, "Oh, that's an interesting way to do that,"
Mm-hmm.
and this is a way. And it seems like kind of what you're describing is almost like IB's basket trader, but just more like a interface, which would probably be easier to get started with. So, as you're, I guess, as we're ticking off features to look for in the broker is, make sure you're not getting obliterated by commissions for no reason. And then also, what tech do they have? Especially if you're on your path to the kind of systematic side of things, is if you are taking this seriously and it's just a web-based interface that has a buy and a sell button, well, maybe you switch brokers to something that has like even like a Webull or something that has a pretty robust platform. And maybe there's something there that can just help, pull you into the journey if you see something like, oh, that's a cool scanner or a new way to enter orders or something like that.
Yeah, and I think you see some of the features you see in platforms that are catered to professionals are will give you some ideas. And when you see the differences, you're like, okay, I could see, okay, well, why is this offered here? This advanced feature that's not in this other simpler platform. Why would somebody want to use this? It does give you, sort of nudges you in certain directions and makes you think about what's possible.
Yeah. So, and it's one of those things where more and more, not to always bring everything back to AI, but as developers get more efficient and are able to, pump out code and build things more effectively, I do think there'll probably be, you know, a convergence here of different brokers. Like even Robinhood, for example, launched a downloaded application with like hotkeys to enter trades and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So as it's easier and easier to make this tech, I think what you'll find is that more and more brokers out there are going to have access to like more and more tools. So maybe switching around will be less important, but if you're sitting with a broker right now, especially ones with like an old bank or something like that, they're probably not going to be innovating this quickly. So, maybe look for that. And, it's not one of those, we're not just talking about if you're picking a broker for the first time, but if, you've got a sizable account, you can move, especially with the pattern day trader rule going away, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about on another podcast. But you could move a couple grand over to another account and play. And if you don't like it, move it back or move it somewhere else, or maybe just have that as your testing ground, and you're gonna move between brokers because you guys have the option, so you definitely should
Yeah,
take advantage of it, right?
yeah. And thinking back on CyberTrader, this was the first platform I was on that was catering to pros, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew some what I would call professional traders were using the platform. So, and those order templates, the more I think about it now, the more that influenced what you see in the trade client now. Like there's the batching of orders that you can do, like the trades as far as like a trade whole trade setup that's automated.
Mm-hmm.
All that has lineage all the way back to that experience I had with CyberTrader. Um, so yeah, it's this has been really fun for sort of thinking back through this. So I'm interested to hear. I'd be interested to hear if any listeners, at what point they remember one of the brokerages referring to. So I'm guessing very few remember CyberTrader.
I was about to say you're just asking them to date themselves
Yeah.
now, right? That's the which one of these that you've remembered. And yeah, it's really cool to, I think, go down this just to show it, especially like we talked about with new people, that this stuff has changed, right? This is not the way it was before. These things kind of over time have drifted into different directions, and you're starting to see that. I think more and more. I think you're going to see more kind of mergers and buyouts and as thing goes on. And I think the next kind of frontier, and you're seeing a little bit pop up, is like, using agents to place trades for you. And like, I know this public company, I hear this all the time, where you can just tell it what strategy you want it to run, and it can just run the strategy for you forever with your money, right? And like with
Yeah.
most technology, it's probably going to be real crap to begin with, but 10 years from now, who knows, right? So whatever broker you're doing, you want to make sure they're keeping up enough, I think, with technology, but not like building out dumb stuff that you don't really care about.
Yeah. So after CyberTrader, I'm pretty sure CyberTrader got bought out by Schwab, and they spent a long time working on this new version of CyberTrader, merging it in with Schwab's platform. And what they came up with, I I think was different enough that I was like, okay, I don't like this anymore. I could tell they'd made some shortcuts, and it just didn't
Hmm.
feel like the right thing to do. So I'm pretty sure from then I switched to Scottrade Elite.
Yeah.
And so Scottrade was the brokerage at the time. They had a downloadable platform called Scottrade Elite. Pretty sure that was I can't remember if I made my first day trade on CyberTrader or Scottrade. Pretty sure it was Scottrade.
Oh,
But
and that's if anyone's that old, right? The what the hell? That's the helicopter commercial that was on CNBC every
uh-huh.
5 seconds. The guy's like got off a helicopter because he was so important and had some trades to make. I remember just because we had at my old prop firm, we had CNBC just playing all day. It drove me nuts up in the corner. And yeah, you would see that commercial just every 5 seconds over and over again.
And so I think a big part of the reason that I switched to Scottrade Elite was Trade Ideas was built in to the platform,
Hmm.
and you got it for free. So, which was kind of crazy because there's one of those helicopter commercials. I'll have to find the YouTube video for this. Highlighted, it was the CEO of Scottrade riding in this helicopter, and he was talking about trade ideas. It was, it was in the default view when you brought up Scottrade Elite. Um, and they highlighted it in this commercial and really put trade ideas on the map, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably where, again, if you were, especially back then, when there was some advantage to news flow like that, that's right, all gone now with high frequency traders and stuff. To be most active traders were watching like a CNBC at some point, and to just get inundated like all the time. It seemed like CNBC always has 5 commercials they're allowed to run. It's just one of those over and over again. It's
Yeah.
gonna make a huge difference, that having that kind of stuff built in. But yeah, just that brought me back that and I'm sure I don't know if you ever went with E-Trade, but if we're talking about famous commercials from that era,
Yeah.
that was the other one with the E-Trade baby. That was
Yeah.
and it shows how much I don't see that kind of stuff right now, but it shows how much interest there was to get your money in a broker, especially when they were charging those commissions. Because you had, yeah, like the viral E-Trade baby that was on like the Super Bowl and all of this, and you had Scottrade advertising, and you had it was the guy from Law and Order that was doing TD Ameritrade, I remember. And yeah, there's tons of commercials all the time. And I just don't really see that too much anymore. So it's just probably not profitable, I guess.
Yeah. So I stayed, I liked Scottrade. I think the platform was pretty good. Um, at the time, though, I was starting to day trade, doing well, increasing my size. And I started realizing that I wanted a couple things. One, I wanted to be able to use an API, or I was starting to think about that.
Hmm.
Scottrade didn't have an API. And it's funny because you would talk to a lot of these brokers about, hey, are you going to have an API soon? And they would say, yeah, we're interested in that. It's not really a priority now, though. And you could tell at the time that the ones that were interested in it were sort of thinking ahead. And so that was one reason that I wanted to switch from Scottrade was I was looking for some place with an API. The other reason was I was doing a lot of shorting. Probably
Yeah.
I would say about 60% of my profits were coming from the short side then. And a lot of some of the signals that were coming through were for trades that were hard to borrow. And Scottrade at the time didn't have as good, well, I didn't think it had as good uh, uh, a borrow list. as Interactive Brokers. I wasn't sure, but sort of the word on the street and just anecdotally, I heard that their locate list was a lot better. So for those two reasons, I was like, well, I don't, even though IB, I don't really see a lot of commercials during the Super Bowl for IB,
Yeah.
but I knew that there were some traders that were using it. I knew there was a bit of a learning curve. I knew some people just hated it and would never use it. Some people said the support was terrible, but for
Those people
everything
are right.
about
Yeah.
their platform, their API, and from a certain subset of traders that I knew were using it that I knew did well, I thought, okay, I think I should switch to IB, at least give it a try.
Well, and that's another one we can add to kind of, I guess, the checklist, right? Is that, we talked about, right, make sure you're not getting killed on the commission side of things, and that they're not selling your order flow as well. That's probably two things put together. The technology aspect, right? Make sure that they're at least have the technology of things that you're interested in, and even if you don't know what you're interested in, like try a couple because there might be some that's there. And then, like you mentioned, I know the short locate thing is a big deal, right? Do they have access? You could almost even, I think, bucket that in. Do they have access to instruments that you're interested in? And there's some brokers out there. If you're an options guy, if you've built your options models, and I know there's a lot of quants out there in the option space, make sure they have ability to do that stuff. If you're a futures guy, if you're crypto, whatever it is, and same with shorting. If you're shorting, you need to kind of understand that they're not all shorts are created equal, and that's what we heard when we were interviewing the CEO of the broker. There is that everyone's got different access to different things, and I know some of the people who are real hardcore on shorting will have multiple brokers, and because if one doesn't have it, maybe the other one does, the kind of thing. But
Yeah.
if that's important to you, you have to look that up, and it might be as simple as going through some of your most recent trades, or even trades that you wanted to get and maybe your current broker couldn't, and then going and checking the locate with the other broker, and could you have made those same trades, or even the ones that you missed, could you have maybe made some trades there? Because like we talked about with commissions, well, what if you're going to pay an extra 10 grand a year in commissions, but that one trade that you would have been able to get locates for, that broker had it and you would have made 20K. Well, then it makes way more sense to even go and pay that broker a little bit more, right? So that's something I think you need to look at as well. I know that's huge for a lot of the people, especially who are showing like low float runners and things like that.
Yeah. So I switched to IB, started using their API, and as I developed the software that I was using to make my trades, I started using that API. Then I had an account with MB Trading and that's when I did the comparison because I had code that would connect to either one. I would run the same strategy through both and compare the fills. And I'm not sure it was just pure execution. I think there was something with the platform with MB Trading that just wasn't fast enough. But for whatever reason, the fills weren't good enough. And I felt like, well, the reason I'm just going to continue with IB here. So the other thing that IB did, and they still have it up on their website, some of the stuff's probably not even changed since then, but they had extensive documentation on their extensive library of order types. Long ago, we did an episode on order types you could go back and listen to. There are so many order types that IB supports that you will not find anywhere else. And I remember just looking at the documentation for all these order types thinking, okay, how could I use this one? Where would this make sense? How could I? And I got an education there just looking at the documentation and brainstorming. The same with their API. The main thing that IB provides still to this day, and I still bring this up when I talk to other brokers, and I don't know why nobody else supports this, and that's the timed exit. A server held timed
Yep.
exit order. That sort of completed the loop for my 100% automation for my trades, because that was the one thing that uh, no other broker had the order type for, which is, okay, so I enter my entry order, and then I've got a stop order, an optional target order, all those going at the same time. But in addition to that, I've got a timed exit that gets me out at a certain time of day before the end of the day, typically for most strategies. So
And
all
that's
of that server held.
and that's the part I was going to hammer on, and I think that's the important part, is because there's probably a lot of devs and things watching us. So, oh well, I just have something wake up and make sure everything's liquidated by the end of the day or something. But that assumes, which I think is a podcast we're going to record soon, is that you have an active connection and there's nothing broken,
Yeah.
there's nothing whatever. And, to feel confident in full automation, i.e. turn it on and walk away, right? You have to know that all aspects of the trade are covered. So that the trade is entered, there's a protective stop loss order, and that you're going to be out near the end of the day, because stop losses don't work at the end of the day. So it'd be very unfortunate to, have a short one of these low float penny stocks and be killing it because it's just tanking all day. And then something happens and you don't enter by the end of the day, and then it gaps up 200% tomorrow. That's just to, show that it could be a catastrophic loss if that exit doesn't take place.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll do a whole episode on that, because I think such a great topic. But that's the kind of thing I was thinking about, because I knew that, okay, the strategy's working well. I can make a lot more money by scaling wide. So there was one year there where I took 300 trades. The following year, I took 3,000. And that was as I implemented the automation at IB. And yeah, that just opened up a whole set of, like, a whole way of thinking that nobody had ever taught me. I never talked to anybody that did it this way. And I was like, okay, this is a very good path for me. But I needed the platform to be solid, reliable, and I really liked that those orders were server held.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think that's just a level of comfort, right? That's one thing that I really do appreciate with Interactive Brokers, is that I don't worry about, again, I live in Canada, so a lot of ice storms, a lot of, I live in the middle of the woods, trees fall down, hit power lines and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just not, it's like, okay, at the very least, I know that everything's being run there. I can usually get on my phone and close things manually or something if I have to. But I just know that if I just leave it, then everything, even for things like swing trades, right? You can set, for you, it's like at the end of the day, but you can set time stops for specific days. So you can kind of have the whole thing on rails for a lot of different kind of trading ideas as well. So is there anything else I think that we're missing, right? Because it's funny that we glossed over like customer support. Is that something that, because Interactive Brokers filled, right, the technology and the decent commission rates without really having the option not to sell your order flow. I know they have like a light version or something that you can, and then also decent on the short locates. But like you mentioned, and I kind of joked, their customer service is atrocious. Like, so where is it that you rank that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the other thing, there were two questions in my mind. One was, is the short locate inventory really better than Scottrade?
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, I realized, yeah, it is significantly better. It's not perfect, but it was better than what I was using at the time. So that was confirmation. The other nice thing about that is I could log that information to log files from my trading robot I was using. Same thing you could do now with Trade Client with MabeKit, but it logs it so I could see over time. So I have this archive of, okay, I tried to trade this, but it wasn't shortable. So I could go back and see and then compare and sort of brainstorm about ways to improve that. The second thing was the second unknown was customer support.
Mhm.
And when I created my account there, the whole process was completely automated. So I didn't really have to interact with support as I onboarded. I don't remember major issues with that I needed to get somebody on the phone, which was good. There were occasionally times where I did need to. So that was that, but it was pretty rare. Now, partway through, so I would say probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years into using Interactive Brokers, I get this email, and it's from Interactive Brokers, and they say, "Hey, Dave, from your trading activity, you qualify for what's called key account services." So at that point, I was in this key account services. They said, here's a phone number you can call. And they would answer on like the second ring every time I called, which was completely different than everything I'd heard about IB.
Mhm.
I think I think this support thing has tailed off over the years. They don't put as much emphasis into it. I think just because they've grown so much and they have more accounts, they can't do it.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was pretty perfect, right? It's nice to be able to have somebody like, I think it was like the same guy or the same one or two guys would answer the call.
Mhm.
So that was really fantastic. But like I said, I was in a pretty unique situation, and I don't believe they do that anymore. But it was quite nice to have at the time.
Well, yeah, there is something to be said if your account is large enough, and it's going to depend on your account and the broker that you're with. As soon as your account is large enough, then you will get some sort of preferential treatment. Now, yeah, for a large broker like IB, that bar might be way higher than, maybe a niche broker, that's only got a handful of clients. But that's another thing to keep in mind is, right, if you're bringing over a couple $1,000s, right, it doesn't matter what broker it is, you're just going to be kind of with the riffraff. But I do think that even though they may not have that service advertised directly, I bet you it's one of those that if you raised a stink, that you would get it escalated, right? Because these are, glorified call centers, right? So you got your, you know, slightly above minimum wage, bottom of the rung type person who's basically mostly trying to get grandmothers signed on. And then you probably have tiers above that, and how quickly you go to it and you say, this is my account value, I'm going to move it somewhere else. I'm sure you'll get you get popped up a
Yeah.
little bit there as well. So that's something to think about if and that would be like a personal thing, depending on how much you think you need to contact, because hopefully you're never contacting the support of your broker. Like
Yeah.
it's never a good thing if you're not just doing it because they did an awesome job. And so hopefully you're never doing it. So if you're very competent in your ability to utilize their platform, or if you're using API stuff to build into that, then you shouldn't have to contact your broker, and that's fine. But if you're someone who's listening to this and you don't even have a broker yet, and you don't know what buttons to hit or whatever, it may be worthwhile going to someone that has a little bit better reputation, or someone that you would be a little bit of a bigger fish in a smaller pond to get those questions escalated quickly. But the way I look at it with Interactive Brokers, I know that their customer service is not good, but it's been years since I've ever had to ask anything about it.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those. It might be like insurance that when I need it, I really wished it was better, but I don't need it very often, so I'm not using it.
Yeah. So the last change I've made in brokerages is I wanted to be able to actually pay for locates. So some of the short trades I was making, I couldn't, even the improved locate availability of Interactive Brokers, there was some that I could see, well, I could get this by paying for a locate, but I need to use another the brokerage. So I moved I have an additional account now just for being able to get the short locate for the strategies that where that comes into play. And I use a DOS based broker called Think Alpha. And we might have a representative from them on the podcast at some point. But yeah, it's so I basically have two main accounts now that I direct trades to, IB and DOS, where I would be able to get the short locate.
So that's interesting. So before we, I think we painted a good picture of the major things to look for, but up here in Canada, right, I don't have access to these. So why don't you just speak a little bit about these DOS based brokers for people who might not know? I understand the kind of mechanic behind them, but just so people can see, because it's one of those things that if you look at them and you think they're all kind of individual, like brokers kind of in and of themselves, you might get a little bit worried because they're smaller, but the way they're attached to things in the back end, I think make people feel a little better. If you just want to explain that.
Yeah, so DOS is a software, like a front end, a downloadable front end that a lot of, so I would call them boutique brokerages support. And there's a few different softwares that these brokerages can use as their front end. But it seems like DOS is sort of one out, or seems like they've had momentum for a long time now, and that's sort of the default. Partly because they have a good API that's well supported, and so a lot of API traders will use that by default. So there are brokerages that will offer DOS as their front end. And a lot of these are smaller, like I said, boutique firms that are catering to active traders, a lot of times short traders. And you have, like, they'll compete on support. Like we had Brandon on, his broker has DOS as a front end. And his pitch is, I'm going to pick up the phone when you call, which, like you said, and like we said last time, go back and listen to the episode if you haven't. If you haven't, I mean, you don't really need to do that very often, but when you do, it's really usually a very urgent issue. So it's nice to have somebody that answers, that knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and unless I'm wrong here, which I could be, and I'll just be wrong on the podcast, but they're all like they're filling brokers. So somewhere on the back end, they're linked to a big giant name that you will know, right? They're not themselves sending your order to the market. That's flowing through somewhere. Because when I look at these things, I know there's an initial worry of, oh, well, if this is just like a one, there's like two guys that work at this broker, is it kind of less legitimate, or what's going on there? But the way I kind of understood it is they're kind of the front facing, the people you talk to, they're the place you send your money and all that kind of stuff. But they have the backing of these kind of monolith brokers that just don't want to deal with kind of individual retail clients anymore. So they kind of outsource. I don't know if franchise the right word, but like you can set up these, like me and you could set up one of these brokers if we wanted to. We would just need to have the backing of one of these big corporations.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's the right way to think about it. Yep.
So, yeah. So again, we were both surprised we didn't do this episode, but I think it's important. We both settled on a broker, but if you want to, again, experiment or go out and find kind of your own thing, that's some framework that you have to look at, right? Make sure you have the right technology for you, the right instruments for you, that you're not getting ran over by commissions, especially you Canadian people, because I still think there's even 1999 trades out there. So just be careful.
And the other thing to point out is, when you go researching for a broker, be careful about who you see recommending these, because a lot of times they're getting paid when you sign up for an account. So they're getting some commission by you putting money there, which I don't do. Like, anytime you hear something on this podcast, it's going to be because I think it's the best thing. I'm not getting paid for you to open an account at IB or Think Alpha or anywhere. So Just keep that in mind.
Well, and I would always look at that. I'm not anti that at all. I just think, like you mentioned, you do your own research on top of it, right? Someone can say, "Hey, use this broker; it's great. Here's an affiliate link," and that might be a good starting point. And then you go and you look at it, and then make that checklist and say, "Okay, does it have all the things that I need?" And it's one of those places that there is some comfort in being with someone huge. Like I do feel comfortable being with Interactive Brokers, knowing that they've existed forever. They have multi-billion-dollar hedge fund clients. I know this because when I worked in the hedge fund space, you'd be surprised how many massive, like 5, $10 billion hedge funds use Interactive Brokers as
Yeah.
their clientele. So that makes me feel good because they're not going to screw around with someone like me. It's not worth the reputational damage. It's not worth any of this. They're going to be kind of on the up and up. So sometimes, and like Dave mentioned, in some instances, it's good to go niche and boutique, but I do think there's some advantage in just large name recognition kind of corporation. Like they're just not going to. Uh, I'm not worried about Interactive Brokers like disappearing with my money anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, the length of time they've been in business is an important thing you want to look at in a brokerage for sure.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in. And again, you can date yourself in the comments the way Dave wanted
Yeah.
to if you want, if you remember all these ancient brokers. But until next time, I'm Michael Noss.
And I'm Dave May. Talk to you next time on Line Your Own Pockets.